This is part 2 of my 12 ways to improve your marketing performance, to increase your sales, and grow your lists. I'm focusing particularly on a checklist that is going to help you increase cash flow, list value, and value to your customers. This is how you make your marketing automation work for you. And in the first section, I covered 1 through 7. In this section, we're going to cover 8 through 12. And these are items you can implement right now. You don't need any special tools. You don't need any special knowledge. Now, my organization can help you implement them because some of them are a little technical, but listen carefully. You will find something here that's going to put money in your pocket, that's going to help your clients, that's going to help you get results. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Let's get started with number 8. Now, I'm updating my course number AI4 about quick performance measures. And before you can even capture the measure, number 8, you need to make sure you verify your forms and site speed. This is more important than ever before. Now, this isn't just the site speed for your website. If you're receiving leads by telephone or by direct mail, which is still happening today for the more profitable businesses out there, you want to measure how quickly you can go from an individual making the opt-in to that first follow-up. Now, so they call in. So when I was at Lillian Vernon, they had a bunch of, like a big giant warehouse full of people that answered phones. Nowadays, it could be people in India or all around the world. You want to know when they called the number, so your tracking is on the call. You want to know how many calls came in. You want to know how quickly those calls turned into leads in your CRM system. Remember, we're tracking from our e-commerce platform forward, not from the first interaction. If there's nothing happening in your e-commerce platform, then we know to check our sales forms and our opt-in forms and things like that, because very often opt-in forms break. People don't answer the telephone like they're supposed to. Those postcards come in and never get coded into the system. There's a lot of interesting automation that we can do to check that cycle to make sure that lead is getting serviced quickly. Now, I know you're not making any money when they're just opting in. It's a cost. But again, we want to make sure it works great because it's hard to get leads from broken forms or slow websites. You want to have the technical analytics in place to fix the problem. So I'll give you an example on the postcards, because postcards are a great way to take an email message and turn it into a physical, tangible thing if you have the addresses of your prospects, which there are ways to get the addresses. But if you send a postcard, there are systems that will give a personal URL that includes the name and address of the individual that received the postcard. So let's say you rent a mailing list of a target audience. You use the tips we gave you earlier. You know who your buyers are. You go to a list broker. They get you a list, and you can have a one-time use, and you send your very best email campaign, format it like a postcard. Now, there's a couple different nuances. You guys know there's different nuances for what a postcard would be. But now the person has either called a telephone number or they have clicked a link on that postcard. That postcard better have a tracking code either embedded in the phone number or embedded in the link itself so that you know who it was that called in. Now that you know who it was that called in, you can take that address and move it over to your inquiry list. And now you've got a postal address for somebody. But if they call in today and they don't get the information they requested till next month, that is completely a waste of time. You've burned money. So knowing that the forms are working, knowing that somebody's answering the phone, knowing that when they click a link, it does what it's supposed to do, it is powerful for you because you'll know that the lead is getting serviced. That's how you feed the funnel. I'll give you a real quick tip here. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but a major marketer sent out a campaign. I got a copy of the campaign. I went to go to the URL. It wasn't working. Not only that, the URL itself wasn't even registered. Now, I've interacted with this marketer before. I've been to their conferences and stuff. I highly respect this individual. It is a common mistake because they didn't know about tip number 8 to verify things work before you send them out. I registered the domain. I redirected that domain to the actual opt-in page that they were sending people to, and then I contacted the company and let them know, that this had happened, and then we transferred the domain after the campaign was done. But they had sent out 27,000. It was like 20 to 27,000 postcards with a broken URL on them. Now, fortunately, it had a phone number, so most people would go to the URL, and then if it didn't work, they'd go to the phone number. But we don't want to put those barriers up in front of prospects. And so making sure the domain works, making sure the personal URL works, making sure this is why we test in sales. Number 9, site quality assurance. So a lot of you folks out there are relying on organic traffic, but that requires your website to be of high quality. Now, what does it mean by high quality? You need to be on the right target keywords. You need to fix the broken links, fix the backlink quality, because you could have a bunch of spammers pointing to your site, and that's going to look bad on you. You want to make sure the pages aren't too short, they aren't too long. You want to make sure there's no duplicate content. There's probably 70 criteria just with site quality that need to be monitored and maintained over the long run. And unfortunately, a broken JavaScript, a company that goes out of business, a new plugin for your WordPress site, all of these things can ruin site quality. So one of the things that I do with clients, again, because I'm on the technical side, I'm on the database marketing side, I'm digging in the numbers. I've got people who make sure that the newsletter sites that I manage stay up and running and make sure our clients stay up and running. We're running weekly audits on sites. And if you've got a few thousand pages and you've got maybe 20 or 30 opt-ins, those things break all the time. So by monitoring site quality, you're able to keep up with what Google expects, but you're also able to keep up with what the actual users need in order for your stuff to work. Number 10, optimize conversion rates. This is extremely important. First off, the forms work. Now, are you A/B splitting or doing multivariate testing on every squeeze page so that you know what works and what doesn't? Now, fortunately, again, there are systems in place, there are plugins in place that'll do these splits for you and then normalize on what is getting the best conversion. So Google optimization works with their Google pay-per-click, and you can see which variation gives you the best conversions. I'd like to see you be able to do that with every source, because too often somebody's going to kick off a Google pay-per-click campaign and they're going to let it run its course, and meanwhile they're not getting any traffic from their Facebook or their Instagram or a postcard campaign on their house list or their email newsletter or a solo email on their house list, solely because not only do they not know how to segment each lead source, but they don't have the A/B splits in place, or they have a very primitive A/B split, and so the higher conversion that they could get by putting more traffic on the site, they really aren't going to do anything with it. Well, I'm telling you, that's a mistake. You want to be able to flood a landing page, test it, make sure it works, and then start ramping up the traffic so that that landing page gets maximum insight, especially for lead generation pages. I want you to have, beyond conversion, an insight about what works and what doesn't. Because as soon as you determine what works, now we can start looking at the conversion curve. Now, this is something you probably don't see in any of these direct response teachers. You got to go to the high level classes or have worked with companies that do this. But there's actually a time over volume curve where you're going to send out to the list. They're going to have a heavy responses up front, and then the responses are going to start to die off over time. Well, if you know where the die-off is and you know what your break-even point is or your doubling rate, we can talk about those in detail when we're talking specifically about a site, but you see that dip. Now you come back in with the next iteration of the campaign. So you're not mailing too frequently because you're seeing the conversions over time. So it's you drop the email on day 0. On day 1, you're probably going to get 50% of all the responses that you'd get. Day 2, you'll probably get another 25%. Day 3, you'll get another 12%. And day 4, it's just a trickle. You need to know that it's day 4 so that you can drop your next campaign to those who didn't respond from the first campaign. That's the second chance offer. That's the follow-up campaign. Now, some marketing systems will do this for you like magic. Other systems, analytical tools will show you these graphs. But ultimately, whatever you're using to optimize conversion rates, you need to have that front-end A/B split going so that you can start knowing what worked to get the conversions. Again, you're cooking people on the page after the action, so you know what kind of people got the conversion, and then you take that new information you have about the same audience in Facebook, the same audience on Twitter, the same audience in an advertising network, the same audience in whatever pay-per-click platform, and then you're going back out on that drop-off, introducing that first offer to the new people on the other page, on the other platform, remailing your existing, and then doing that until you get to zero. So until you start having what's called cannibalization, where the same people are getting the same message more than one. This is advanced performance. But again, now instead of waiting 90 days to get a campaign done and get all the income that's available for that campaign, you're now squeezing that income down into a 30-day window. And that allows you to set up for a follow-up offer of all the buyers on the original set of campaigns, where now you're offering a high ticket. So let's say, for example, you have a customer who has a course. So they have an on-site course. And they are priming the pump for their on-site course with an ebook. And that ebook goes out, and we're doing this buying channel thing with the ebook, and we're testing Facebook and Google pay-per-click and Yahoo's or Bing's pay-per-click. And now you've got all these people coded from where they came from, and you have this pool of people who bought the ebook. You don't want to wait 90 days to then offer them the high-ticket on-site service or the conference or the event. You want to be able to get through all of those marketing channels in as short a period as possible without overlapping existing campaigns. Know who's already opted in so that you're not putting ads in front of people who have already opted in or have already bought the product. And then at the end of that 30 days, you can then start the launch for your high-ticket product. And so you're not waiting 90 days. You're not waiting 120 days. You're not waiting until it's convenient. While it's hot in the minds of your prospect, because you optimize conversion rates, you're going to see it all dip off. You're going to have the majority of your conversions come through. And then you can now either on a segment list send out to these folks the offer. And now you're making more money in less time. You're making bigger chunks of money. You're helping the client have these big cash surges. Now, again, I have a whole program on cash surges, but you have to know when to introduce the cash surge. See, this is important because if you send too many offers, people opt out. If you send too few offers, people lose interest. If you send an offer to somebody who already bought something and that offer offers a discount, now they're upset. Do you see how this works? Again, optimizing conversion rates is more than whether A works or B works. It's actually, there's a time variable in here that you need to make sure you're hitting so that you're keeping that plateau going. You're keeping consistent and regular sales going so that you smooth out the cash flow, that you're recovering the money that you're spending on advertising, and from a client perspective, they hire you as a copywriter and they get more use out of the copy and they recover the funds that they've invested in you. Incredibly important. Number 11, multi-channel syndication. So I touched on that just a little bit right here, but multi-channel syndication is making sure that every collateral piece of material reaches the customers where they are. So I'll give you an example. I record this podcast on Spreaker. It doesn't matter what platform I use. This podcast is recorded. It goes out onto the primary podcast hosting platform, which then sends a link out to Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, like 17 different locations. That was actively configured by my team. It is deliberate. Now there's secondary podcast syndication channels that pick up the podcast itself, but the way the podcast is set up, I know where these people are coming from, so I know what channels are more popular than others. After that, this podcast, which is an audio, goes over to YouTube, and then from YouTube it goes over to Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, a whole bunch of other platforms there. I don't have to lift the finger. Now, I need to make sure it keeps working, and we talked about that in optimization. I need to make sure that these things are still functioning. I need to make sure that the performance links are still working. The attribution links are still working. But that multi-channel syndication, if I put a call to action in the description, now gives me 20 or 30 channels that have an offer on them, and then I can at least track the lead. So you might be saying, well, isn't that difficult to track? Yes, it is difficult to track for me to know how many people are listening to my podcast. But that's an okay problem to have, because when they click through an offer or they contact me with a question, now they're a lead, and I can track them as a lead in my CRM system. And I really care more about leads than I do just the general population. More importantly, as I know which of those leads are customers, so now I can actually track their whole relationship with me. So if they listen to a specific podcast, they contact me and they say, hey, I was just listening to the podcast and you mentioned code AI4 and it was about marketing essentials, I can flag them appropriately in my system and make sure that I'm getting them the right information according to their interest. That's what I talked about serving your customers. But when you have the multi-channel syndication, I do want to know who I'm getting from Apple Podcasts, because now when I'm applying my marketing budget, I want to know to promote so Spotify, for example, my podcast is syndicated on Spotify. My team set up the Spotify admin console for the podcast. If I have a episode that is really doing hot on Spotify, I can go in and put $100 behind it. So I know it's already converting. I know that audience is interested. I know what my demographics are. I can go in there and boost the campaign. Now, again, many of my podcasts are also syndicated on social media, so I can boost it on Facebook. I can boost it on LinkedIn. I get a lot of traffic from LinkedIn with professionals. Do you have an offer on every video description, every social media channel, every profile, and do you have it properly coded so that you know where people came from? Now, that's something for a team like mine, who's completely socially inept and completely analytical and completely anal retentive, because it does take a little bit of time. If you like to write copy, you write copy. But remember, if you don't know where the traffic is coming from, and you don't know who converts for what reasons, and you don't know what your prospects are interested in, then it's really hard to write copy that sells. So again, I know a lot of folks are disappointed at times that I talk about the business of copywriting, but if you're going to build an agency, if you're going to be a copywriter with maybe a personal assistant who's helping you grow your book of business, there are certain value adds that you can deliver to your customer that you may not have the technical ability to do, but we can easily backfill for you. There are teams that you can build out there. But again, number 11 is that multi-channel syndication with CTA. That call to action gives you ability to figure out where these people are coming from and deliver a little bit extra value and to get somebody into a sales funnel. Isn't that magical? Isn't that amazing? Now, all this stuff breaks like every month, but once you get the basics set up, it just works. I'm going to record a Spreaker podcast. It's going to show up to my subscribers on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audibles, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all over the place. Thousands and thousands of individuals. But that means nothing. That's a vanity measure. When we talk about performance measures, there's vanity measures that distract people, and there's performance measures that put money on the bottom line, that serve customers, that measure quality of a list. I want the opt-in. And in order to get the opt-in, I have to invite the people to come out and be a part of something. Now, I don't have sponsors, and most of your higher end clients won't have sponsors. Their customers are paying for the media. So I've got to be able to say to you, hey, look, I'm about to cover step number 12. But if there's anything that I've covered in part 1 or part 2 of this particular podcast that you have questions about, visit me at www.adbriefings.co.uk. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. If you're not already a member of our newsletter, be sure to opt into the newsletter, because we have insights like this come out, and we have opportunities to show you this online, because I do know that the audio presentation of this is not always optimal for everybody. So we actually do demonstrations, and we go through the step-by-step of how to implement this. And it's, again, the marketing optimization essentials. This is where you get started. So be sure to ask your questions. Now, step 12, number 12 on this checklist is really, it makes me sad at times. I hear people with 300,000 names on a list, 50,000 names on a list. I had 67,000 people on my house list, and I did this one thing and brought that list down to 4,700. Now you might be saying, well, Justin, 67,000 names on a list sounds a lot better than 4,700. Not really, because you want to segment your list into marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. These are the most important. Sales qualified leads are the most important. If you've got a list that's full of bad email addresses, bad postal addresses, bad telephone numbers, and in my case, I was collecting fax addresses as well, and you don't have the proper permission to use these names on a list, or the permission says expired, maybe they opted in last year and you haven't emailed them in 12 months, and now they don't know who you are, then the list quality can turn a million. You could have 1 million subscribers on YouTube and not make any money. Now, fortunately, I know how to turn names on a list into money in your pocket through the marketing optimization that I'm teaching you right now. So hopefully you picked up 1 or 2 items that you can use with your client and help them turn names into dollars, because you really want to be making about $1 per name every month. So if you've got 500,000 names on a list, my expectation is that you're producing $1 per name per month. That would be $500,000 gross. Now, the optimization is, if you're not making it every month, can we make it every 6 months? If you're not making it every 6 months, can we make it every year? And then we develop the framework, which is the copy and the campaigns and the making sure the automation works and making sure the follow-up works. But ultimately, I'd like you to squeeze that out to $1 in profit every month per every name on your list. And sometimes the smaller list, Jim Strahl used to say it all the time, a list of 100 buyers is worth more than a list of 100,000 tire kickers. Okay? My 67,000 names on the list were not qualified prospects to buy what it is that I had to offer. And I whittled down that list with data validation, and there's tools to do it today, with list verification. Did you know that if you mail a list that has a high rate of bad addresses or poor open rates or high opt-outs, that some providers will cancel your account? HubSpot, for example. I sent a list that I hadn't sent for a little while. Now I send my list through different means and sources. We talked about that, making sure you have that segmentation. But for some reason, this particular list had a high bounce rate. And what had happened is somebody on my team, we do more work for our clients than we do for ourselves. Somebody just didn't finish cleaning off the list, because we actually delete our hard bounces. They didn't finish cleaning the list up, and I had sent a little bit too soon. It was the right time for the list, not the right time for our technology. And the HubSpot stopped the campaign midway. Now I go in, fix 20 addresses or something, and restart the campaign. It's not a big deal. But some of these platforms, when you click send, it could take 2 or 3 days to send a large list. At Lilly and Vernon, we were sending 2.3 million emails from our own platform. Now that's not, Lilly and Vernon has made a lot of mistakes and they don't exist anymore. They're not my client. I can disclose that information. But there was an IBM mainframe doing data validation every day, and we would send cells, giant cells, but some of these cells could be 100,000 email addresses, and we were managing it all in-house. But even then, we would send a campaign over time. We wouldn't send it all at once, because all it took is sending a campaign with a bad link. Somebody who didn't have this list of 12 essentials, they didn't test the form, or the e-commerce platform gets overwhelmed because they have a really good campaign, and 2.1 million emails go out, and suddenly 500,000 people are going to that special offer that we knew everything. We did everything right, and we knew that offer was great, but now there's 500,000 people banging on a website, and the website doesn't work. You see it all the time. So again, list quality is important, but on top of list quality, do we segment the list? Do we test in cells? Do we send across multiple email systems? If we're sending a postcard campaign, so in the case of sending a large campaign and then our website gets overwhelmed, we immediately want to follow up with a tear sheet or a postcard campaign or an extra catalog mailing, because those people have a desire to buy, but our system failed them. And so what I do as a professional, I've been a senior systems administrator in the past. I've done business development. I've assembled a team to manage the publishing that we do at my core company, which is JWH Consolidated. I've worked in risk management and optimized business processes. I've got some experience that's going to make a massive difference if you're running decent sized campaigns. Now, again, for you, a decent sized campaign could be 5,000 names. And I've seen MailChimp and all these platforms shut down smaller lists. But if you've got a good offer and it can't make it to the person who can buy, it doesn't matter how good the offer is. So from a copywriting perspective, you could write the very best copy in the world, and if the prospect never gets to see it, or the wrong prospect sees it, or the customer decides to bold the wrong thing because their formatting wasn't right, or their opt-in page doesn't work, or the link in the email message is broken, or the link in the email message tends to get blocked by browser-related ad blocking, and you don't know this stuff, then you are going to have money wasted. You could have a client that hates your copy because it didn't work when you find out later that it didn't work because half of their technical stuff wasn't functioning. So how do we apply these 12 ways to optimize your marketing? These are essential ways. Well, how we address these is by using this as a checklist for quality assurance. If you've got a new client coming on board, and you notice they got Google Tag Manager, but the events are not triggering around maybe a Facebook Pixel. They're advertised. I got a client that they work with another ad agency. They're a good client, but we don't do a lot of work with them because they think they can do it themselves. That's fine. They hired an ad agency, and I go through and do the audit for them. And the ad agency decided that it wasn't going to be they're advertising on Facebook, but they didn't put the pixel up. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll work as a consultant on your team. And so I said to the client, I said, look, there's no Facebook pixel. You're spending $30,000 a month on Facebook ads. And there's no Facebook pixel segmenting that list. So that means your ad agency doesn't know what converts. So how are they optimizing your campaigns? So I'm a fly on the wall in the background, and I'm using the little chat thing, and they call their client, they call their agency, and they say, hey, we're doing a lot of Facebook advertising. Show me what converts and what doesn't. And they show these custom reports. And I text over BS. Ask them to show you the Facebook console. Okay, show the Facebook console, show the conversion rates, show the URLs of where they're sending those leads. Guess what this agency was doing? And you better not do this as an agency. I'll kick you out of ad briefings. But this agency was actually doing what's called a man in the middle. And so the agency was sending the traffic to a consolidator. So all the opt-ins were actually owned by the agency. They were being passed along to the client, but they're also being passed along to 4 other competitors. And they were not direct competitors. They were people who served the same customer. So now when the client is following up, my client is following up to the leads generated by this agency. They don't know where they came from other than this agency. And those leads are getting bombarded by 4 other companies sending out offers. They could have been good leads, and sometimes they are. But ultimately, they didn't own them. They didn't own the analytics or the data associated with those leads. They didn't have their Google Analytics cookieing these people so that they could track behavior on the site or time on site. They had nothing because this agency set up this middle ground that was basically, this is valuable data, by the way, that was basically absorbing this data. That's why when I go to show you how this stuff works, or we do a site audit by hand, I will sign a non-disclosure because I'm going to see your stats, and these stats are extremely valuable. And knowing these cookies are set up, so you're doing $30,000 a month in Facebook advertising, you want to know which ads are working and which aren't. You take the ads that are working and you put them in your content library. And we'll talk about that in another episode. But you put it in your content library. So now you're informing the next ad agency, which they ended up getting another ad agency. You're informing the next ad agency of what works and what doesn't. And now you're getting back in the marketplace. Now, if the previous agency was transparent and they were doing what's called a marketing cooperative or a joint venture, then it's okay. That model of having a page in the middle is okay because it does certain things of scale. It helps you reduce your pay-per-click costs. It prevents you from cannibalizing your pay-per-click dollars or artificially running up the pay-per-click rates. We'll talk about that some other time. But again, these 12 essentials are going to increase your cash flow because you're going to get more money in less time. They're going to increase your list value by preventing you from getting knocked off of a list provider, helping you have backups of your list, helping you make sure the list is properly segmented, and then ultimately deliver value to your customers. That end user who gets that email that has the solution that they've been waiting for, that they've been deeply desiring, that they've been searching for on your website but maybe couldn't find it, and it's now at a favorable price, is going to help them get to the next level. But all in all, this is going to make your marketing automation work for you. You're paying big dollars for these platforms and not getting the most out of them. And that's understandable because you're not a nerd like I am. You don't collect nerds that just do database marketing. You don't have on your desk the book Strategic Database Marketing sitting on top of the Complete Direct Mail List Handbook. Like literally, this is within reach. I'm using hardcore Melvin Powers, Dan Kennedy, Jim Straw, old school Bob Bly methodology to get the analytics correct, to get the automation correct, and to get the conversion rates performing. You need to know what works and what doesn't. You need to know what segments are profitable and which segments aren't. You need to know that when you've got an offer, that there's a high probability of response. If that's the type of service that you'd like to talk about and you have a marketing spend of $10,000 a month at minimum, we can make that pay back. We can make it so that this month you put out the 10 and next month you get the 10 back, so that at least from your client's perspective, because we do this as a white label service to you as a marketer, as a copywriter, as a small agency, we can help you pitch the client and help them understand that because we're doing this optimization and because you're managing these things and having access to these demographics, that you're going to write better copy, they're going to have better lead conversion rates, they're going to know what works and what doesn't, plus that every dollar they invest in you will turn over and come back. It's a circulating economy rather than a spend. And so now they're $10,000 a month, their $50,000 a month, their $100,000 a month advertising budget is accountable. They know where the money's going. They know who on their list converts, and now you're down there niching. Instead of writing one sales letter, you're writing 3 sales letters. It's the same sales letter, but it's tailored for each niche. It's got appropriate, testimonials for each niche, and instead of getting a 5% conversion or a 10% conversion, they're getting 20% conversions on some of them. And, other ones, they might still be getting a low conversion of 1% or 2%. But because you were able to dial in the niche, you're able to boost that conversion, to boost the efficiency of their marketing dollar, and overall help them perform better. So again, my commitment to you is to help you with the business of copywriting. The back end is critical to making sure the copy works so that you know what works, so your client knows what works. If you're interested in a service-based engagement where I help your organization do this, or individual coaching and mentoring where I help you become more efficient with your marketing, more efficient with the processes associated with keeping your marketing efficient and going, the processes and dashboards associated with tracking, then visit us at www.adbriefings.co.uk. Go to the contact page and say, I want help with implementing Marketing Essentials. Now, if you just have a question, that's fine too. Because you're a podcast listener, because you're a newsletter subscriber, you can also go to that page and ask a question. You're going to go to the www.adbriefings.co.uk, go to the contact page. You're going to mention Marketing Optimization Essentials, Program AI4. And by the way, artificial intelligence can help you with this, but I originally wrote this program in 2000, so I'm updating the program. That's why I'm going through these steps. And every fundamental that we talk about works to optimize the campaigns. And now I've adapted it to work to optimize YouTube channels, to optimize websites, e-commerce platforms like Shopify, to optimize mailing lists, to segment lists across multiple providers so you can be more aggressive with campaigns. And I didn't mention this tip, but you can be pretty aggressive with non-converting leads. Somebody's been on your list for 3 or 4 years and they still haven't bought. You can give them hard offers that might be offensive to your regular customers, but are going to be the old do your business or get off the pot. This is the kind of power that you can have, but again, you have to understand these concepts. I gave you 12 factors here in between part 1 and part 2. This is part 2. I want to make sure you have this because we're here to help you transform business relationships into profits. You got to have that value delivery to the customer while using words that sell. Better, more effective communications comes from understanding who these people are. They're not just names on a list. It's not just a list. It's not 67,000 people in a contact management system. It turned out it was 4,700 people who were hot buyers, ready to do business, ready to engage in consulting services. And out of there were 2 or 3 clients that were 6-figure a year opportunities. And I was able to serve them. I was able to drill down into their needs and desires, and you can too. That's why I put this program together. Again, if you have any questions, I know these were 2 long programs. I want to make sure you listen to this multiple times. I want to make sure that you're mapping these things out. I want to make sure that you have a procedure in place, whether my team's doing it for you or you're doing it yourself, because this is what differentiates you between somebody who gets killed in inflation in this type of marketplace or someone who thrives and then just incredible results. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing Copywriting Tips. I thank you so much for investing your time and energy in these things. They will make a difference to you. Thanks for listening.